Oh, hello, and welcome to Al Dente Rigamortis. I'm Review Cultist.
I'm Mikey. The E stands for evil.
And I'm the gamer in yellow.
And we're here to discuss those internet stories, most creepy and most pasta, and be critically silly doing it. Tonight we have SCPs. Guys, we're done in January.
Yeah, finally.
Until next year. But yeah, we're doing SCP-3898.
Can I book January off tomorrow or next week? Next year?
Next week? Sure, yeah, next week you can.
January of next week, yeah.
I understand it was a bit of a gauntlet.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we're doing SCP-3898. It is by CadaverCommander from the SCP Foundation. And I guess I'll just dive into the rundown that I have here. So SCP-3898 is an Admiralty anchor that shows signs of degradation similar to ocean weathering for several hundred years. It is to be contained in a container space of 15 by 15 by 15 meters. Use of remote operated restraining and pacification apparatus for subject retrieval, as well as an automated cleaning system for the purpose of removing various contaminants from the anchor are applied, as you don't want to go too close to this thing, into its zone of influence, as it exerts psychological control over individuals within its zone of influence. Most of it stemming from depression-like symptoms. Usually, as long as the D-class test subjects don't make physical contact, they make a full recovery from these effects after a grace period. The exception to this rule being Subject 13, who apparently had a conversation with whatever presence is on the other side of the anchor's transmitter. They then reject whatever offer the presence gave. It was kind of a one-way conversation that from the view of the on-site researchers. And then destroyed his own eyes with his thumbs without hesitation, not wanting to see what presumably cannot be unseen.
Without flinching or anything either. Yeah,
he's just nope. This was in a Call of Cthulhu scenario. This would be the NPC who had already cut out his eyes so he didn't have to see the strange angles of reality, and would have done it without screaming or pain, because the true pain was seeing the real world as it is, and not the thin veil that humanity sees. So then there's the that's just from the non-touching, non-contact tests that they ran. They also ran contact tests, and they're a tad more lethal.
Into seawater.
I have a comment on that actually in my actual thoughts. But yes, basically yes, it does look like they just suddenly become water, and then that's the one end of the range, and then the other end of the range is seawater and even sea life in various stages of life and death, replacing crucial parts of their anatomy, or just constantly filling up their lungs, kind of stuff. The exception to this rule of contact being lethal is Subject 58, who has a conversation with whatever presence is on the other side of the anchor's transmitter. Unlike Subject 13, 58 agrees to the supposed same arrangement proposed by 13, or proposed to 13, and lifts up the hefty 350 kilogram anchor, raising it to the sky before vanishing out of his clothes and the test chamber entirely to parts unknown, leaving the anchor to fall down onto the chamber floor.
Saying I accept the burden.
Yeah, he did a proclamation and then vanished. I accept the burden, kind of thing. Investigation is ongoing regarding the connection between this SCP and the other CadaverCommander SCP entries. It doesn't actually say that, but it's that's basically the gist of what it is, of what that statement is that it's the other SCPs that CadaverCommander have included into the SCP, because they're all kind of connected and linked in certain ways. But yeah, that's the rundown for SCP-3898. So, do we have a Grammar Inquisition, guys?
No.
I have one sentence.
Okay.
An it sentence. That's not a
Yeah.
story.
And now an it sentence with Mikey. The E stands for evil. Take it away.
The intro might be wasted on this, but that's fine.
It has displayed no material or chemical abnormalities and yields to sampling and destructive testing as expected. Finn.
Yep. I really do need to get like some sampling of finger snaps for those.
Yeah.
One day I might actually go in and add in like bongo music as he's doing it.
Mhm.
But effort to follow in the footsteps of another podcaster. But yeah, I guess we will then move on to actual thoughts. So, I'm going to start with this thing here. This is really just regarding the remote operated restraining arms and armatures that they use and apparatuses. Like specifically the one from Proximity Test 06-20/2014. In the immediate effects thing, subject begins to sob, verbally expressing personal regrets and lamenting her inability to recall the sound of her brother's voice. This continues for approximately 4 minutes before the subject spontaneously loses consciousness, secreting tears and twitching occasionally. Subject removed from chamber via remote operated retrieval system after 6 minutes and 22 seconds of total exposure. Anybody else just kind of picture like a large claw game machine? Like,
Yeah, pretty much.
and then like a secondary one with just like a Windex dispenser, just like clean up the mess or clean up any like excess materials.
It's probably pretty accurate.
Yeah. And then my second comment to that was like, is Boston Dynamics just an SCP front? Like for like
Yeah.
for their remote operating retrieval unit manufacturing? Yeah, clearly. No, it's Boss Town Dynamics, the Corridor Digital short film mock-ups.
Yes.
God, I would love to see Corridor Digital do some SCP Foundation stuff. Some of their stuff is already kind of SCP-ish, so.
Mm-hmm.
And then, anyways, on to my next one. This is same. Okay, no, this is actually from the same. This is actually from the same proximity test. This is from lasting effects. Symptoms of major depressive disorder lasting approximately 3 days with occasional manic episodes. No treatment necessary. And this is like the kind of the recovery times after D subjects are done testing and so like some of the lasting effects, and then how they are treated afterward. And it got me kind of thinking, when a D class gets used for a test and survives, do you think the SCP Foundation uses them again in future tests?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, no. My thinking would be that they wouldn't, because it would
Contaminate the.
No, continue. Yeah.
Because if you use them again, you don't know what actual lasting effects are affecting them that you don't know about. So you can't really do a proper control test with someone who's already been exposed to some sort of SCP entity, because you don't know, they're not a true baseline human. You don't know what's been fucked up with them.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly my point here. Is like, for some reason this got me thinking. It's like, are they going to use this? Are they going to use I think it's 03 or maybe it's just 01. Yeah, they're going to use this D class again because like they've survived this and like they've come back healthy. It's like, no, I don't think they would, because like that would, like you said, that would totally ruin. That would cross contaminate possibly, or would run the risk of that. So. Yeah, no, this just kind of got me thinking about like the resource assets that are D class people. Also,
they're one-time use consumables.
Yeah, exactly. Even if they survive.
Yeah.
Also, I do kind of find it funny that they because like D class test subjects are like generally criminals and like incarcerated individuals. So I find it kind of funny that they because like not to like blanket statement over incarcerated like individuals as a whole, but I might end up doing that inadvertently. In that I feel like they generally don't have the best like psych record. So like trying to get their like psychological gauge when coming into contact with something like this, like, are they the best types of subjects to be doing this?
No, but it's the only type of subject you can use. It's the only ones you have that are expendable.
That's true. Yeah, they're not willing. And fortunately, the SCP Foundation is not so cold as to use like normal, like, or not normal, but like, I guess psychologically healthy people. They're using what they have.
Also, Mikey, do you want to argue your point that they'll use them again?
Yeah, well, my thought process, if they survive one, how many more can they survive?
How many? See, but then you fall into the little like that little saying of you live long enough to become the next scenario, or you live long enough to become the next SCP entry.
I mean, that would be an interesting SCP entry. I'm just gonna say.
Yeah, it totally would.
Some D-class guy who's been through like 50 different SCPs and survived. Because of that, he's like this weird, like abomination of like weird little like mutant powers, but he's still basically normal.
God, it's a SCP redacted, the veteran in quotes.
Yeah,
he just sits in they've done up his room like the kind of the apartment like test room from Portal 2, where like Chell wakes up and like she's in kind of like an apartment, but it's all a facade and like a test chamber, and he's just like sitting there on couch or like just like chilling and like with a smoke. It's like, I've seen some shit, man.
Yeah, pretty accurate.
Yeah. And then
if that doesn't exist, it should.
Yes. Yeah. Guys, whoever's out there on the SCP Foundation, get on that.
Unless in the actual lore of SCP they don't reuse the test subjects, in which case don't do it, because then that would break the.
I mean, there can be
lore and everything.
There can always be exceptions and anomalies.
Well, it could be a prequel scenario before they came up with that rule.
Yeah.
Oh, like this guy is the reason that they don't reuse them anymore. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because like I assume, because like I kind of imagine like the SCP Foundation. I don't know, for some reason, like it always like I kind of like I think back on like maybe even like because of like pop culture and stuff like I think of the SCP having like been around even like around the times of like the 50s and stuff, and like thinking on like 50s and 60s and 70s government like experiments and projects and stuff like that. At least in pop culture, I just imagine like the early days of the SCP Foundation when they were doing running tests and stuff, and it's just like, well, let's reuse this guy. He seems to be healthy. We just slapped him in the face and gave him a cigarette. He seems fine now. Let's put him through again. And then like after like the 50th test and the 50th slap and a cigarette, he's become something more than human. But yeah, good fodder for like an SCP story. As sort of like a prequel to the D-class protocols that they have now. Sort of the
maybe they weren't even called D-class then; they were called something else.
Yeah, maybe D-class like stemmed from like the guy's name was just named like Derek or Damien, or Richard, just a dick, just to have like a little bit of like dark humor to the entry. But I guess I'll move on to my next. Quote here and my next comments here. So this is regarding proximity test 10/16/2014, and like just the effects, like the depressive effects and the control that it seems to have over the agents or over the D-class entities and like when it's talking to them and stuff. This is, I believe, SCP-13, or this is D-class subject 13. So I like the level of escalation that we get here and the way it illustrates the object's like nature and influence. Not gonna lie, I've been playing a lot of Mass Effect recently, and these tests felt a lot like how the Reapers do their indoctrination powers. Just the psychological control the machine aliens in that series have over organics when in proximity to the machines or the tools that they employ to their influence through. but more than that, I can also see like that kind of like control being used, that kind of like instance of control and like contamination over the mind of a human, being straight up like a Delta Green or Call of Cthulhu game like style horror, with the object being just like this, being a conduit for some outer force to influence humanity, sort of like a median or a conduit. Oh, hang on. Have I had this D-class guy like named or numbered wrong?
Probably. I think it's 09, not 13.
Is it 09? Why did I think it was 13? Okay, well, sorry, I apologize. It's 09. Maybe future me will just add 09 whenever I want to say 13. Maybe. But yeah, 09 is a perfect example of the like I brought up earlier. 09 is a perfect example of the character in a Cthulhu game or a Delta Green game, who starts seeing the sanity, like the insanity of reality, and like the truth of the cosmos, and then denies the premise of it, like by just like no you, and then gouges their own eyes out, or like removes their sensory or the sensory organs that are now suddenly able to perceive that truth, because they just don't want to know that stuff anymore. Yeah, this event for me like was kind of like a turning point in this story, because like so far like okay, like depressive moments, like all right, like this thing's like exerting some influence over people, and then this one is like, oh wow, he's actually talking to something, and it's talking back. Yeah, the event reveals like that whatever is on the other side of the anchor is not only aware of the SCP Foundation, but is also like aware of their operations and kind of like scoffing a little bit at it. And maybe that's just the personality or the from the perspective of the D class that's talking, and like kind of the mouthpiece, because again, like he's some type of criminal of ill repute, so like his personality is kind of filtering in whatever message we're getting from the presence beyond the anchor. But all in all, yeah, this felt very Lovecraftian to me in terms of its like vibes and such. And then we move on to the contact tests. So just regarding these were all pretty crazy and fun preternatural death scenes I found when I was reading them. I was like, oh wow, okay. But here's the ones that kind of stood out to me particularly. So, and this is from this is subject 13. Sorry, that's where I got 13 from. So this is 13th of April, 2015. Subject was, let's just call them 13 because the rest of it's like 3898. Subject's body is instantly transmuted into an equivalent volume of clear fluid, which loses cohesion and splashes to the floor of the containment chamber. A sample of this fluid was examined and determined to be seawater with living microbes consistent with those found in the epipelagic zone. Yeah, the epipelagic zone of the mid-Pacific Ocean. So 13, like to me, like this wasn't like for some I read like, oh, instantly transmuted and then like to the equivalent of this fluid of water. To me, that like I kind of got the sense that it wasn't so much transmuted, it's just teleported in a way where it switched places with the equivalent mass of wherever it was. So like it just he teleported or they teleported and switched places with their equivalent mass to seawater.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if it was transported to the chamber.
Oh yeah, that's what I was thinking, or like close by.
The chamber's not full of water though.
But there's a cave way into it that's full of water, so transport there, and then he has to swim up.
Yeah,
if he wants to survive.
Yeah, exactly. And that could be a really interesting story or side story kind of thing that you could have like as kind of linked to this and linked to that cave one, where the deep sea divers that are like checking out that cave, or like that are maybe the SCP Foundation guys that are monitoring that cave, suddenly just see a random dude just like pop up in the ocean nearby, like pop out through the cave funnel, like through the fluke that goes up into the cave, or again just like some random sea divers or fishermen in the Pacific who just like randomly pick up this dude who just appears in the ocean. Yeah, they're just like it'd be basically I could see it ready when this person appears. Trying to figure out what happened, like how this happened or whatever. Like maybe trying to recover the guy if he's still alive, or recover the body, like figure out what's going on, and then having to also deal with the intercept recovery crew from the SCP. Sort of have like kind of a bit of a not miscommunication, but just like kind of a out of context event happen where like the player characters would not know the intentions of the SCP guys, and generally the SCP folks are all about like keeping things under wraps and covering up things. So like they might try to like deal with the people that are in the witnesses, like with excessive force. So like that could basically be the start of the scenario, is like finding this person or their body, like, or talking to them, or like finding out how they just suddenly appeared in front of the scuba divers, and then having to deal with a black ops crew like coming at them. Sort of be like the supernatural. It's not actually a supernatural scenario in what you're in the antagonisms. It's just the supernatural thing is the catalyst for the rest of the scenario.
Yeah, I can see that.
Cool. And then the other ones are pretty. I don't know, like for strangely enough, like I don't know why, but like it's like the other ones like that we see, which are like the guy who like just instantaneously dies because like seawater and sea life is inside of his body where it shouldn't be, or the person drowns because his lungs just keep pouring up with water. Like I hate to say, like I found them enjoyable, but like I have really nothing to say about them otherwise, because they're kind of like,
I gotta say, you're getting a sick amount of joy from this story.
It's sort of like a gallows humor to me, like, because there is, I mean, like it's SCP. Like I think for me there's a precedence, like when it comes to SCP, it's just like the same kind of like dark humor, like gallows humor that you get from like those like the portal, some of the portal stuff, where like it's like, oh yes, and like test subject will do the test, and like you see like the person like do the portal like too high and then like break their legs, and then the machines just like push them into the incinerator rather than help them. It's like that kind of like dark humor in the SCP Foundation. And then so like the those death scenes, I hate to say that, like I don't mean to say this, but it felt like I've seen that kind of thing happen before, so it was kind of like old hat. Or that wasn't as for me. They didn't stand out as much to me as like the first entry, which is the Subject 13, or the last one. Like in terms of like giving me ideas for like inspiration for something, or like to like think on them. They're kind of cut and dry to me.
You've seen shit where a dude's lungs have been magically, like there's a magic portal in his lungs that's constantly filling them up with water.
Yep, in D&D.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's like I don't. It's not that like I don't appreciate them. I do like I do find them interesting, and like, oh god, that's terrifying, and like that's a weird way to die. But I've kind of seen it before, whereas the other ones I had some more thoughts on them than the previous ones. So I'll just move on to the next one. So the next one is 09 October 2015. Oh no, sorry, not that one actually. Sorry, that's the drowning one. 06 September 2015. This is D class 34, and subject's body is in its entirety is crushed into a fine paste by a swift, sudden impact from above. Origin of force unknown. Impact energy estimated at roughly 400. Is that kilonewtons? What is KN? Did I actually get that right? Kilonewtons?
Yep.
Okay. No information obtainable from remains. Oh, did I get it wrong?
Kilonewton.
Okay, cool.
Kilonewton is correct.
Okay. So at a first glance on this, I was like, okay, so like maybe the admiral, like the thing beyond on the other side of the anchor, just like exerted like an invisible fist. Or the other idea that kind of sprung to mind is like, I wonder if this was perhaps the compressive effect of being at the bottom of the marionette, like of that trench, like at the bottom of the ocean, like that those compressive forces of pressure without the actual ocean. Yeah, like it's like basically the pressure of the depths of the ocean without having the actual ocean, and then like just touching the effect, like touching the anchor, gave a link to that, and then just like crushed the.
It depends if that kind of pressure is vertical down like that, or if it would be like an all-around pressure, which is what I
Yeah,
feel like it would be, honestly. Like if you squished
yeah.
into like a ball and then that little meatball fell to the ground, yeah.
Oh, like, oh god. Also, I think some of my laughter and like my side laughter on this has been just like, because if I wasn't, it was just like, oh god, this is horrible. Like it's just so like bizarre, the deaths. That's kind of where some of the humor is coming from, because like I can't help but laugh, because otherwise like it's like that's the only reaction my body's kind of giving me for this. Other than that, I'm just a sick fuck. Or and
That's
like
probably more accurate.
and a horror movie gorehound. So who knows? Because like again, I can see this like being like I kind of saw this like almost like through like the lens of like Cabin in the Woods style movie, or like just a movie where it's like kind of like bureaucratic horror, where they're just like sending subjects in. It's like, all right, test subject number 34 crushed. All right, moving clean up the zone. Let's put in the number 35. Like just that kind of like terrible, like, but also kind of like just it's funny in how mundane they are treating this horrific bullshit. But anyway, yeah, the you do put up a point on the on my like the compression force kind of thing. Is like it should have, if that was the case, it might be more like that. It just like all came around from all sides rather than downward. So like maybe just the presence on the other side is exuding some force of will there.
Mm-hmm. Although that would be the only one that's not just related to the sea directly, if that's the case.
Unless again the force is directed from the bottom, because like the guy's at the like for all intent for like a split second he was at the bottom of the ocean and just got crushed. Like he was crushed by the weight of the ocean's depths. Like that's maybe what it's trying to do. I don't know. It's again one of those things where it's a sort of we don't have all the details, and we're not supposed to, because that's what makes it weird and creepy.
Mm-hmm.
But again, this one had me thinking about like the how horrible and weird the death was. But I will move on to the my last note for before I go into another segment I have. But and I'll let you guys obviously talk after that or before that. Regarding incident report 3898-01, and this is the guy who touches it and doesn't die, but has a conversation with whatever presence is on the other side and accepts the burden of the anchor, and then and then like raptures away, basically. So and I love how this entry like has kind of this kind of is a continuation of my escalation comment from before. I do like how this scenario, this SCP entry escalates. Like we get small things first, then we get the denial, the denial of the offer sort of thing, where like the character talks to an entity and denies their premise, and then we get the contact information, the contact tests, which have like varying, very again escalating the results of tests. But then we get this, which kind of is an anomaly among those contact tests, and goes further because the character, rather than reject after conversating, is that even a way to say that? Anyway, while talking to the entity like number 9 did, this individual 58, I believe it's 58, decides to accept the offer rather than deny it. So we get kind of like the full range of like outcomes throughout this entire entry. And I don't know, man, like I just really like the connection like between like, because like, it has the I remember like after when this happened, like when the guy like I accept the burden, or like I deny the burden, or I do not accept the burden kind of thing from number 9 and 58. It reminded me of our talk from I believe it was 8. It was the cavern in at the bottom of the trench entry.
3983.
3898. Is it 38983?
3983.
3893.
3983.
No, actually, I have it here. It's 3893.
Okay.
Sorry, no, this is 3898.
I know that. The one you're talking about is 3983, though.
Yes.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay, yeah. So regarding seemingly a connection between this entry, SCP-3898, and SCP-3893, the cavern with the body pile that like the what is it, the character creators scenario.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah, where and it's interesting to I love the mystery and the wonderment this entry and that connection kind of gives me. It gives me this, like, it's almost like just enough like kind of bait to get me stuck on the proverbial hook, like thinking about like the connections and the possibilities of what the fuck is going on in this entry, like behind the scenes, like what we're not seeing. Like it's giving us just enough to, at least for me, to keep me wanting to like think about like the meta plot, I guess, of what's going on behind the scenes. So I'll just end my actual thoughts here with just, I really hope we do find out more regarding these entries, and the story behind them. Though I also don't mind if we don't get like all the answers, because I don't mind just wondering about like the possibilities of what's going on. But yeah, and I do have another little segment for actual thoughts, but I will save it for after everybody else is gone. So Mikey, D stands for evil. Now that I'm done my mad ramblings, I will move on. I will stay silent.
All right. First off, I have to agree with Gamer in Yellow that the cavern is 3983.
Hey, you kept saying the wrong code.
Shit,
I
you're
got
right.
tired of correcting you.
Okay, I apologize.
It's like almost 100 past the one we just read now.
Fuck. Okay, that's I mean, it makes sense because like it's not the same person doing all these entries. Okay.
All right. So with that out of the way,
Here's your grammar.
Yeah, there's the grammar inquisition.
Yeah, I'm grammar inquisitioning you, cultist.
It's dialogue.
It's the way the cultist talks incessantly.
All right. So anyway, this is an interesting entity. There is a lot of fodder for game scenarios and such, but one thing that I want to know that wasn't touched on in the entry is what happened to Agent Palmer.
Wait, what?
In the entry, there's an image, and it says,
shit! You're right. Yeah.
During initial recovery, moments before Agent Palmer's transmutation.
Oh yeah, that's not mentioned at all.
What the fuck? You dropped the ball there, CadaverCommander. We want to know. What did he turn into? What did he transmute into? Did he just like vanish into water, or did he like become a bunch of like a? Oh god! Like, did he become a school of fish suddenly inside of a suit?
A whole bunch of worms, so he's like a walking worm man now.
Or eels, even like to stay with the nautical theme.
Oh, I know. I was going to call back to your tabletop games we do.
Oh yeah, the worm that walks. Yeah, is Palmer really Petonius? to throw back to our to One Less Die and some of our tabletop games that you can listen to. Like a year from now when I post those ones. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah. So so that aside, like, this has a lot of potential for like what happened with this before the SCP got to it.
Yeah, nothing's said about how they retrieved it. You're right. We know that this dude or woman, whatever, got transmuted into something, but
we don't know what. Yeah. He got they got transmuted into redacted. Sorry.
And yeah, it'd be fine if it's redacted, but there's like nothing saying what happened in regards to them getting this in the first place. It's just, we have it. This is what happens. Where pretty much most other things, it talks about how they got it as well.
It is kind of odd that it's just like they found a cool image, and like it's like they found a cool out behind the scenes, behind the veil of the fiction. Like this is a great example of like finding an image and like building an SCP off of it. But then it like but then it doesn't give the how we don't get like the information of like how they recovered this thing or like how they found out about it, like you said. It's like
they just built the facility around it.
Yeah, like is this
It's still on the bottom of the ocean.
yeah, like if they had to build the test chamber around this like 15 by 15 by 15 meter chamber around this thing, and then they like pumped out all the water, so like the D class are actually like when they walk over to the anchor, they're actually just walking over like seafloor.
That'd be hard to keep people away from that, though.
Yeah,
Just
that's
a random room at the bottom of the ocean.
Well, that's where you have like the defense turrets.
Mm-hmm.
But
because that's not suspicious.
Oh yeah, no, clearly not. Do you have any ideas for like the prequel story, like how the SCP might find out about this thing, or?
Well, you could start off with sort of deep sea divers finding it, and then basically attaching it to their ship.
But how do they put it on their ship without? Exactly. Yeah.
Well, they'd use a claw-like mechanism, or
that they would have to get close enough to be like within a meter to hook it up, and they'd be feeling the effects.
Yeah, so they'd suffer severe depression and be like, "Do I really want to do this?"
See, I would say that like take that idea, like take that premise of like, yeah, this is discovered by some people out on the ocean, obviously. Mm-hmm. Maybe this is like, but maybe like the maybe there's some urban legends on the sea that have sprung up as a result of its like power. Like maybe like this thing is like on near some shallow waters near like a near several wrecks. And like maybe even like since it's in the Pacific, we can't do the Bermuda Triangle, but we can do the Devil's Triangle, which is basically the Bermuda Triangle in the Pacific. So maybe this is like somewhere in the Devil's Triangle. And so there's some stories about wrecks around it that like get people's interest in going to check it out. But people have heard like there's some stories of like people who have gone down there and they've never returned, or they've like people have found their tank equipment and so that float back up to the surface because like, and they don't know what happened to them. And then so we then basically this could either be like you could write this up as a story associated with this SCP entry, or this could just straight up be a Call of Cthulhu or like Fear Itself scenario, or like any horror role-playing system kind of game where you're the treasure hunters or the wreck divers who go down to this area, and we get like we get a nice mix of psychological horror as you are getting closer to proximity to the anchor. And then, like, you watch, like, Steve, Diver Steve, go get, like, actually make contact, and then just, like we said, just become a bunch of eels or worms or something out of his suit, or, like, his entire suit just, like, changes, and, like, it's just him left.
Actually, no.
No?
No, I'll read a quote. Physical contact defined as touching SCP-3898 with an uncovered body part.
I counter for that. If the water is warm enough, a lot of divers don't use gloves.
All right.
There is a counter to that, yeah. Because I think actually, if you look at the image, he does have a bare hand. And I do know that.
Yeah, it's hard to see.
God damn it, gamer! Curse your you are an SCP entry.
Wow. I don't see a freaking hand anywhere. I can't even see a hand shape anywhere. How are you saying that there's a human hand? Or an uncovered hand.
His hand, like, that's touching the anchor.
I'm like zooming in and enhancing.
It's all black. No, like I can see like there's a little bit of black there, but like I can see like digits like that are lighter.
You have a way higher resolution image than I do, because all I see is a black smear.
All right.
Yeah, he has a mechanical hand.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, but Agent Palmer has a transmutation when he touches the object. So
yeah. Well, they sent him down because he had a robotic arm already.
But because it was integrated into his like nervous system, like to be used, it might as well be a bare hand.
Mm-hmm.
This went one of two ways: either whoopsie, or he just didn't have gloves on. Let's move on.
Yeah, good idea. But yeah, and again, like for like so. going back to like the scenario, is like, yeah, basically have the characters be in the water when whoever is touching the anchor transforms, and then like, holy fuck, roll sand checks, roll stress checks, whatever checks you need to roll for seeing horrible shit, and then you're just like, what the fuck. And then again, like obviously there's going to be like, you're going to go back up topside, call in for emergency stuff. SCP's already like keeping tabs on everything thanks to their global communication tapping system. And then that's where the Black Ops team shows up again and for recovery. And that's where Agent Palmer shows up.
Also, now that I'm thinking about it, it's kind of dumb that Agent Palmer would be touching this barehanded.
Yeah.
Because if they're investigating this, that's because some poor dope touched it barehanded.
Yep.
And that happened.
It really is kind of dumb. Unless, like, okay, I think we just found a plot hole. Because either Palmer there is gloved. Oops, sorry.
It's just the SCP chapter out of Derpland, that's all.
Yes, clearly. Yeah.
They got it done, but, you know.
Problem is, like, SCP, I would assume, has a tight control over recruits. But occasionally, like, because of the bureaucratic horror and incompetencies of bureaucratic bullshit, Agent Palmer neglected to notify them that he was born and raised out of Derpland.
Mm-hmm.
So he's like, and then just whatever happened to him, redacted.
Full of fish, so a whole bunch of fish just swam out from his sleeves because he had no gloves on at that point.
Yeah. And maybe he didn't completely go. Like, maybe just his arm just turned into a moray eel. Like, you know, those ones that like those what? Eel arm. Yeah. He's got snake arms. Eel arms. Oh god, that is such a like in-joke callback to an RPG scenario. Oh god. Okay, so I guess for the audience, there's a spell in Call of Cthulhu called Hands of Kalubra that literally turn your hands into snakes, for bite attacks.
Your arms, not just
like
your hands.
Yeah. And when Mikey here, once upon a time ago, we were running a game, and Mikey had that spell. It was his only spell in the entire game.
Why would that be your only spell?
I don't know, Mikey. Why was that your only spell?
Because it was useful.
Was it? So when he got grabbed by a monster and was getting flown away like 60 to 70 feet in the air, and then and climbing, he used the spell to attack the monster. So he's just like, all right, so what are you gonna do there, Mikey? And he's like, and then he like did like the wavy hand motions. It's like snake arms. And ineffectually, because the monster was immune to venom, ineffectually cast a spell that wouldn't help him in the lightest, and that was the half end of his character. But yeah, it got ingrained as a joke among our group for years to come. Just, hey Mikey, snake arms, just eels. But yeah, exactly. Like it just becomes. Then Agent Palmer became eel arm Palmer. Yeah. God. Oh God, I love that idea. Yeah. The character like, or you're the crew. So the story could either be like down in the water, or you're the ship crew who are waiting for the dive crew to come back up. When suddenly you get like distress calls from down there from like the other teams, like we're coming up, Palmer's down. What's going on? And then they like you raise him, you bring him up, and like go to like it's like restrain his hand. What? And, holy shit! Like roll sand checks because like he's suddenly like got a riding.
Like he's telling everyone to roll sand checks. In character,
the eel is telling everybody to roll sand checks.
Oh, I see.
Just even the score. It's like, yeah, no, I love that idea. I love this idea of like a prequel story or scenario of like how the agency discovered the presence of the anchor.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful. I love it. Thank you, Mikey.
You're welcome. And that's pretty much all I've got. So on to the Gamer in Yellow.
All right, buddy, you're up.
Okay. Mine might actually be grammar in a way, as I'm realizing.
Okay.
So pretty early on, it's saying under no circumstances are Foundation personnel permitted to enter SCP-3898's effective radius. And then it just goes on.
Yep.
And so my note here is I hope it brings up the radius at some point, because I do feel it should lead with the radius. Because if someone's reading this, it might be because they need information on what not to do with this immediately. Meanwhile, you have to read down 5 paragraphs to find out that as long as you're 5 feet away from it, you're fine.
Okay. See, okay. So for me, I read
Oh.
that in conjunction with the 15 by 15 by 15 meters. I was like, all right, that's the distance of safety is 15 meters.
But here's the thing. At this point, I don't know anything about what this entity even is. So it could be something that like fluctuates in size between the size of a penny and 15 feet in one direction. So it has to be that big. But it's like, okay, that's its containment cube. But what's to say its effective radius can't be 100 feet outside the cube, just like its zone of influence?
Okay, that's fair. Also, yeah, I do see humans that enter the area approximately 5 meters from the SCP. Yeah, So, I mean, I don't know. I get what you're saying, but that is also part of the show and reveal sort of mechanic of the SCP entry.
Okay, but what was gained from having to wait 4 or 5 paragraphs to learn you can't be more than, if you're under 5 feet from it, you're fucked. Why can't it say that immediately?
Because it is tied to the effect that it has on humans. So I would counter that maybe to put it on at the front as well would be redundant, because you're going to find out that information as you read, because you're going to read the rest of the article.
I know, but I'm thinking, okay, my whole point with this note is not as a reader, it's as an in-lore document that a member of the SCP would read to learn information on this entity.
Okay.
You would put the important shit up front, like containment procedures. It has to be in a cube this big, and no one can be within 5 feet of the anchor, which is the effective radius of the effects that follow.
Okay.
Well,
yeah. Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah. And it's 5 meters, not 5 feet.
Sorry. We're just grammar inquisitioning each other at this point, because this is what happens when when an entry or story doesn't give us enough grammar issues.
Yeah, it makes us turn on each other.
That's the psychological influence of this story from indirect reading of their entry about it. That's the mimetic virus of this entity. Yeah. No, I can see. I see your point. It is also valid, because a counter to my counter is that the redundancy of having that information in the SCP containment the SCP, the special containment procedure, and in the description just kind of adds on to the redundancy that follows in bureaucratic nonsense. We get under no circumstances our Foundation personnel permitted to enter the SCP-3898 effective radius of 5 meters. And then get down to the description, and then we get why that 5 meter, what exactly happens within that 5 meter of influence.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, no, I've turned around. I accept your inquisition here.
Alrighty then.
Yeah, I see. It's a valid point. There's room for improvement.
Yeah. Well, it could also be assumed that if it's a 15 by 15 containment unit, that by safety measures, you would stay outside of the unit.
Yeah.
Until you know more about what's inside.
Yeah, if they're worried that this thing is like that one other SCP that we did a while back, where the influence, its line of influence is growing. So all right, we figured out that it's about 5 meters for its zone of influence. Let's back it up a little. Let's back up the containment unit a bit more to give it some breathing room in case it needs to. In case it starts growing that influence on future tests.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's the only note I got.
All right.
Thoughts.
Okay. Well, before we go into final thoughts, I do have one last little segment that I have to bring up, because it's a CadaverCommander story, and Cthulhu could make it better. That's the segment title.
What a surprise.
Yeah. So for me, honestly, King in Yellow, Nodens could be behind this, like either or of those entities. Subjects are either going off to Carcosa or the Dreamlands. Hell, you might even be able to use Hypnos, the god of slumber, if you want a deeper cut in the mythos than the King in Yellow or Nodens, who are kind of A-list mythos entities, at least in terms of like in terms of the writing communities that write around like the Cthulhu mythos and such. Also, Hypnos does, I believe, I think his story one of his story in Lovecraft's writing did. I'm pretty sure that was Hypnos, who appears to a downed U-boat at the bottom of the ocean. So yeah, this could be like either like the King in Yellow, basically trying to lure victims to to Carcosa in this new traipsing, sort of like how we brought up with 3983. Did I get it right, guys?
No.
3983.
3983?
No.
Is it 3893? Damn it!
The cave one is 3898.
Nope.
No, it's 3983.
Yeah. At the
Yeah,
bottom of the
sorry.
entry.
Yeah, because I scrolled to the bottom of the entry to find that. Yeah, so it is 3983. Yeah.
The one we did previously is the higher number.
Yeah. Like that one, I brought up like the King in Yellow could be the Admiral in Yellow. Sort of like the Admiralty in Yellow. Or again, this could be another the presence beyond the anchor could be another avatar of Nodens, because Nodens is all about like recruiting for his campaign against his adversaries, and like basically sort of like a wild hunt sort of entity where he brings people into the fold of his supernatural domain. So yeah, I could see either or even like the Hypnos god being used for if you want to pull this story in for like a Call of Cthulhu game or a Delta Green game, you could use those eldritch gods that are already in those settings as the mastermind or the force that's powering this anchor. But yeah, that's my Cthulhu could make it better segment. Is just hello or Nodens, maybe. So I suppose we'll move on to final thoughts. Yeah, this is another entity, another object tied to the previous connected SCPs that by CadaverCommander. I'm very much intrigued by the mystery of them and the ideas that they all inspire, including this one specifically. We're not told too much more. Like, we don't go too much farther into knowing what's going on exactly. But I don't hate that, because what we get here is just really kind of like elaborates more on like some of the like the weirdness that's going on, and it just kind of excites me. It excites me and makes me wonder more about what's going on, in a good way. Also, regarding the bottom of this entry page, we actually get a segment or like a section where you can read more entries and even stories from CadaverCommander, like the author. And I wish more entries actually had that. Like,
Wait,
there's
where?
actually at the very bottom of this entry, there is a little like pink like bar that says more from this author, and then when you click it, it gives you kind of like the wiki, like further reading sort of display with all the SCPs that they've done, all the tales they've made, and like other stuff. So yeah, we got a ton of more material to read up, because I plan on browsing that and adding it to our list of discussable subjects. But all in all, I want to give this a recommendation, because I enjoyed the read, and it though you'll probably want to read this if you've read 3983 and some of the other CadaverCommander stories, because it just kind of builds on what's already been brought up.
Mm-hmm.
So that I guess kind of a recommendation with a prerequisite. So, Mikey, the stands for evil.
Yeah, I'm pretty much in the same boat. The item is interesting. It's good fodder for a game scenario. The only thing is that I would like more information, like what happened to Agent Palmer.
Yeah, I honestly, I really feel like that would be like, that should be like an incident report in this entry.
Yeah. So, but all in all, it was entertaining. So I'll recommend it.
All right. And Gamer.
For me, reading this was like kind of a bummer in a way because all the specific examples of depression and sadness really brought this away from horror and just made it feel like a series of short downer stories with like a weirdness of the anchor being there in the background. Even that aside, though, this doesn't really add anything that wasn't already in 3983. Although with the numbering of this being lower than 3983, this happened before the cave. So the SCP found this anchor first and then located the cave that's tied to this anchor after the fact.
Yeah.
But fortunately for me, I read them out of order, so it kind of killed it because this story doesn't really say anything that the cave doesn't already say.
Yeah, that's true.
So in my opinion, I can't recommend this.
All right, fair enough. So then I guess So two recommendations, but with some prerequisites. And unfortunately, because of that prerequisite kind of recommendation, I feel like that's why you're not recommending it, is because you kind of need you read them out of order. So some people might have the same kind of reaction to it.
Honestly, every single thing you've been saying, my thoughts have been the complete opposite. Like you saying that it needs the prerequisite, I think it doesn't need the prerequisite because this should be the first thing that they found.
Yes.
And then this led them to the cave. So you shouldn't have had to read the cave to get what's going on here. And you don't, because it's still pretty vague what's happening. So it's not like information from the cave story would help you here.
Okay, I gotcha.
So just reading this on its own, it would leave a mystery and be like, what the hell's going on? Where are they teleporting to? Are they teleporting? What's this thing it's talking to? And then later on, when they actually find the cave, you get a little bit more information on it.
Okay, so me and Mikey have the idea of you need a prerequisite, whereas you're like, no, just read this first.
Yeah, if you read this first, it'd be better.
Yeah. Unfortunately,
reading the out of horror is a problem, in my opinion.
Yeah. No, it's fair. And it's sort of, I guess, to me, it's both the hindrance and also the freedom of the SCP Foundation itself, like as a writing prompt and as a reading list thing, because you might not have discovered, I didn't discover this until we read through 3983. And then at the bottom there's a link to this one. I was like, oh shit, okay, we got to read that. But if you were reading SCP list down the list, just going down the list of SCP Foundation entries, you'd stumble upon this first. But not everybody reads like that. Some people like to pick and choose, kind of thing, right? So
for sure. But that's also a problem with the story. All of the other connective stories, they're all so different, but still connected. Like one is a flying amalgam of fleshy limbs and stuff. Another one is a fisher troll guy. And then there's the cave. And then this one is basically just the cave 2.0 or 0.5, actually, because it's before. It's the proto cave. But it's basically the same story. It's not separate enough that you can read it on its own, and it's not separate enough that reading them back to back isn't like reading the same story, is what I'm trying to say.
I know, I get you. I mean, again, it's sort of a varying, different opinion sort of thing. But I do also see the validity and I think you should probably read this one first and then read the other one.
Mm-hmm. Or just this needs to be made a little bit more unique. No, it just needs to be made more unique comparatively to the other ones, because, like I said, the other stories that are connected to this are vastly different in their own way. So you're never reading the same story again. Or in this case, I did.
Fair enough. Okay. So I guess, read this one first, but also needs some work, is what I'm getting from this, from our final recommendations.
Yep.
At least in my opinion.
Yeah. No, for sure. So that was this week's episode. So did we, guys, was there any other links in this one? Since that was the issue we had with how we discovered this one, was that this one, that there was a secret link that two of us didn't catch last time?
No, it just refers back to the cave.
Okay. So that means that the next one we have on the roster is SCP-3899, which is the one with the truck, and that has something to do with that third party option from the cave entry.
Mhm.
So I guess look forward to that next episode. And we'll see how that connects to this whole amalgam of interconnected entries. So that's all we have for tonight. If you like what you heard, or if you didn't, leave us a comment in the comment section below if it's posted, whether it be on Podbean, Facebook, YouTube, or Tumblr. You can talk to us on Twitter. Mikey is at the E stands for evil. The Gamer in Yellow is at the Gamer in Yellow, but without that W because his name is very long.
It's got to be.
Yeah. For the Admiral. For the Admiral in Yellow.
Yeah, sure, why not?
Yeah. And I'm at Review Cultist. You can also send us emails at aldenterigamortis@gmail.com. That's aldenterigamortis@gmail.com. Where you can also leave us suggestions for other creepypastas, SCPs, spooky internet sightings of creepy things for us to discuss, review, and talk about. If you'd like to help support the show, you can go to Patreon, look up Al Dente Rigor Mortis, and select the backer tier you'd like to support us at. We have $2 and $5 tier with special episodes, early access, extra content. To our patrons that are helping support the show, thank you guys immensely. You're helping keep those hosting bills at bay, and we very much appreciate that. To our listeners and the authors of these entries and stories, thank you immensely, because without your listenership, it would be like speaking into the void. And without your stories and entries that you're writing and sharing on the internet, we wouldn't have something to discuss and talk about and come up with headcanons and shit. And I'm sad. Or my life would be a lot dimmer. But so what I'm trying to say is thank you. Until next time, I have been your host, Review Cultist.
I'm Mikey, the E stands for evil.
And I'm the Gamer in Yellow.
And this has been Al Dente Rigor Mortis. Sleep well.
Did I throw you for a little bit of a loop? How not into it I was?
No, not really.
Okay.
I understand where you're coming from. Like what you explained it in a way that was like, oh yeah, that does kind of make sense. Like because I apparently fucked up the roster because because of the fumble we had where we hadn't read because we hadn't noticed that there was a link except for Mikey. So
yeah, no, but it's not a fault on your part because, as you said, SCPs aren't necessarily meant to be read in a specific order.
Yeah.
So if you set them up to be read in a specific order, you're writing yourself into a potential problem.
Yeah. No,
everything
honestly,
has to be able to be a standalone.
Yeah. No, I honestly think that you brought up a valid point on a valid criticism for this story is that it should have it should stand alone on itself to be enjoyed, but also have like a connection to the other ones.
You should be able to get the connections, but not have them necessary.
Yeah, exactly. I honestly feel that the inclusion of Palmer's fate might and also how the SCP found this might also kind of maybe make that better, or maybe bring it closer to that, because it would just help elaborate a little bit more on, it would focus more on this object and its weirdness rather than maybe it might fill in some gaps, I suppose.